we have to take you to our third headline, of course, the Experts Panel Energy Dialogue that is ongoing right now. We're going to the Omanye Conference Hall at the Labadi Beach Hotel.
Was set up in honor of Professor Abeku Hammond, who used to be actually the chair of the Energy Commission, also a lecturer at the University of Science and Technology, and we're pleased to have some members of their family here with us. But a real pioneer and thought leader on energy issues, and for a number of years was key in organizing the Flag Bearers Forum on Energy every 4 years, inviting the different parties to come. I think over time, we found that the parties themselves don't have the time to come, but we thought having a panel of experts is almost as good, and hopefully a few members of the different parties will join to share their thoughts. We're really pleased as well that JoyNews is collaborating with us, as well as the BNFT to support. So we're very pleased that all of you are here today. The key really is, one of the key activities of the foundation is shed light on our short to medium term issues, really focusing on the reliability and sustainability of the energy sector, as Israel just mentioned, because at the end of the day, we are looking for a robust and well-built and sustainable energy sector. So on that note, we really thank all of you for joining us. We know we're going to have a very good discussion, and I hand over to Israel.
Thank you very much. Those remarks were very brief, and which goes to tell you exactly the reason why we're here. We're here to have a conversation about energy, and so if the chairman of the foundation doesn't speak much, it means he's leaving all the time to the experts, who I'm going to be introducing shortly. We'll also have some brief remarks by Mrs. Abba Brew Hammond. A round of applause to her, please.
Thank you, Israel. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm presuming everybody here is an interested party in energy affairs in this country. I'll try to follow my chairman's lead and be brief, but I am a teacher of English. I have been teaching for more than 40 years, English literature. And then I married this man, and now I stand here and I dare to presume to know a little about energy. And that should tell you how forceful, how influential he was. He lived, breathed, ate, slept, everything energy that you can think of. Right from when I met him, he was involved in all forms of energy projects. Solar, pepper solar dryers, and traveling all across the country and the world. Over time, we were married for almost 30 years before he passed away. Over time, he got to work in India. He got to work with the Global Energy Partnership, GVEB. He got to work alone too, and set up, and also with friends, set up energy firms and basically NGOs. He set up Kite. He's a founder of Kite. Seed, which was supposed to be a profit-making, but that should tell you he wasn't very much a good of a businessman, so that didn't succeed. But then he went on and helped to set up the Energy Foundation, the Energy Center in KNUST, which the university has graciously named after him the Brew Hammond Energy Center, KNUST. Before all this, he had helped to set up SEDEP. He's a founding member of SEDEP, which is a well-known NGO, development NGO in Ghana. And so Abeku's life was all about development of people, especially of the youth. And his passion was palpable. And if you heard him speak about energy and how sustainable, renewable, equitable, affordable energy could help people to develop individually and come together to develop the country and the world, always with a touchlight more on women, because he believed strongly that women were the benefactors, the beneficiaries, as well as those who suffered if energy was not equitable or available, you know. So he had a hand in the cook stoves that produced less smoke and everything energy. And so when he passed away, the family thought, this time, who is going to do all these energy things and energy work and all that? And fortunately for us, he had very good friends, colleagues in Mr. Kwekwa Ochi, who graciously agreed to be the chair. Professor Kofi Hagan is here, and many others, Dr. Hinkra, and people who worked with him. And therefore, we thought, let's set up something small so that his passion will live on, his influence, his impact in the field of energy, at the very least, will move on. So that is why we set it up. And as I said, we were fortunate to have people who believed in his vision, and therefore the foundation was set up. But we do other things. We help, he had an award scheme in St. Augustine's and Holy Child for maths and science, knowing how young people fear maths and science. So the award is to encourage them to do better. The foundation is hoping that in the near future we will help with little stipends for especially postgraduate research into energy and science. And also where he is buried is a small village in the central region, not far from Nyamransa on the Cape Coast Road, called Nyamfeku Ekrofo. That is where he's buried with his very good friend, another friend of energy, Kofi Texan. They are buried there. And we made an intervention there. And so now we are putting up a KG block. We are setting up a club, literacy and science energy club, and equipping the young people not to fear maths and science, but to do well and study hard. We hope that when we call upon you again, you come and help us discuss energy issues in Ghana, push Ghana forward, because it's all about green, renewable, sustainable, equitable energy for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Brew Hammond. So at this point, I'm going to invite the panelists, and they're going to be taking their seats here so we can get into the conversation. So I'd have Ben Boache, please join us here. And Mr. Koku, you also join us. And Bright Simmons. And Mr. Ofosu Ahinkra. A round of applause for all four of them as they take their seats. So yes, what I'm going to do, we're going to start off with a brief introduction. They're going to tell you why they qualify to be on this seat. And I would want to start with you, Bright. So there's a microphone right next to you. So yes, we're having this conversation about energy. Bright Simmons, well, I know you to be at M Pedigree. M Pedigree, what does that have to do with energy? Maybe there's a whole lot more. Let me check this other microphone.
Okay, I need to turn it on.
All right, great.
Should I proceed to answer?
Yes, please do.
Well, for the last 14 years, I have also been associated with this pesky little organization called Imani that does government oversight. That's primarily what it does, really. It's to look at government policy and play an intermediary role between the research community and the general public. So as far as we're concerned, the problem is not technical research or academic insights. Those abound. There is a lot of technical research being produced already. The challenge is that very rarely does the evidence that is generated by academic researchers and technical experts making its way into policy in a way that has optimal effects for our economic policy making and the like. So the problem is less about disciplinary experts and specialists producing new evidence. The problem is that the evidence that we have in this country is rarely used. So if you don't have organizations like Imani that can say, look, here is what the expert consensus is on an issue, and in this case, energy, why are you acting contrary to that evidence? Then it does not matter how much disciplinary expertise we have in the sector and how much of it is produced, we are not going to change policy making for the better. So I think the role of organizations like Imani, which are not disciplinary specialists, is extremely critical, regardless of the particular discipline or policy area.
All right, thank you very much. And that's it. I mean, is anybody in doubt why Bright should be here? Okay, good. Now I would have Mr. Fosuah Hinkra also introduce himself to us.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Fosuah Hinkra.
Until recently.
My life in Ghana has been associated with energy since 1992. And I linked that with Abeku. When I started at the Ministry of Energy in 1992, Abeku was at KNUST, and we used to share ideas and share notes. When I started the Energy Foundation in 1997, Abeku also started KITE. And we used to compare notes, our annual reports, how each one was doing. And our paths converged in 2009 when he was made the chairman of the Energy Commission. I had joined the Energy Commission as the executive secretary in 2005. So we've come a long way. We work together. I'm a research engineer by training, and I do a lot of research. And in most of the time, we come out with new ideas, innovation. We find out why certain things are happening, and we try to find solutions to them. So energy research has been my passion. At the Energy Commission, I was involved in regulation, and a lot of regulatory activities took place. Over the past 9 months, I've been working with the Africa Development Bank, again, researching on energy in the African continent. Thank you.
All right. So in effect, I can say that you know the energy situation like the back of your hand. Okay. Now, Mr. Benbuache.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all. I'm with the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Do I need to say more?
Okay, so let me add some more to it. You're with the Africa Center for Energy Policy, and you're always on the case of government.
I think that is a bit of misconception. What we do is really to have honest conversation with stakeholders, including government, industry, individuals, civil society, and the broader populace, and essentially to ensure that decisions that are taken are, in line with proper judgment. They serve the better good of society. So across the energy spectrum, we try to monitor what government is doing, what technology is emerging, which direction we think, based on science, a country should be moving towards. And unfortunately, in that space, you tend to come face to face with decisions that may be contrary to yours, and it tends to be classified as being antagonistic with government. But essentially what we're trying to do issues to ensure that we can create this space to benefit the ordinary Ghanaian.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Kojo-Poku.
All right, thank you. Mostly when people see me on search panels, they wonder, how did he end up there? Primarily a businessman. I started business in the energy sector from 2003, and for 17 years, I've been involved in all sorts of energy projects in Ghana. One of the few Ghanaians that were very interested in the upstream, got myself into a block. It's a long story. We don't want to have that discussion here. But I learned a lot in that process. Then along the line, around 2011, formed a company called Small Hydro Development Company to develop the Ankobra River. And that also took me into the renewable sector. Now, the reason I now get to know a little bit about energy, and I will not try to say I know a lot because I'm in the midst of a lot of people who know more than I do, is that I come from the angle of practicality. I'm the guy who have tried to do the business with the policies that have been put in place by government. And the challenges that I come across, now I interrogate it, I go to the ministry, I go to the Energy Commission, and I confront them and find out, why is this policy in place? Have you thought of its implication in terms of its practicality? Because I, being a businessman, I have tried to work with it and it's not working. At the same time, I find myself on the board of a financial institution called Pan-African Capital. So I also have an insight into how to raise money, do structured finance to finance some of these projects. And you realize that if you look at the policy in place and the practicality of a businessman like myself trying to use that policy, you have challenges because most of them are thought of by academics who don't have the practicality of how these policies work. And that is how I got involved in these energy policy forum, working with ASEP and my brother Kofi Jantoa, Imani, Mr. Bento, to try and see how we can also not only be a businessman where when the policy is made, it now affects you, also be on the other side trying to help affect business so that fellow businessmen will be able to have a smooth sail in doing business. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So now you know I've introduced you to our guests or our panelists, or they have introduced themselves to you. They are not the only experts here. We have experts who are also seated in the audience. We couldn't put all the experts on the table because the table is too small. So the experts are also in here. And from time to time, we're going to be coming to them to get their views on some of the issues that are going to be raised here. So this conversation is critical because, yes, we have the political parties come up with their manifestos and tell us what they intend to do, what they want to do as far as our energy sector is concerned. But that's one side of the conversation. And by the way, we invited the political party representatives. Do we have any of the political party representatives around? If you are here on behalf of any political party, just raise your hand. So I get to see you. Okay. So far, there's no representative from the political parties. But that doesn't stop the conversation. All right. So, yes, the political parties have talked about their manifestos and what they intend to do in their manifestos as far as energy is concerned. The experts are going to have a conversation and point us to the critical areas, the areas we should be paying attention to, so that hopefully we can get the politicians to look at these areas and address the critical issues that are in these areas. So I would want to start with you, Mr. Kojo-Poku. For you, what would you say are the critical issues that we should address our minds to as far as the energy sector is concerned?
Well, personally, I think the power sector is very key. And the power sector is key in a sense that it affects all the facets of our society. I have always said that the ministry, from where it came from till today, has to be split up. The ministry came from Ministry of Energy and Mines. It's now Ministry of Energy. At a point, we've known as Ministry of Power, Ministry of Oil and Gas. The ministry had outgrown the people within it now. And for me, I think the first point is to now have a split of the ministry and have Ministry of Power, Ministry of Oil and Gas. The Ministry of Power is very key. Reason being that there's a lot of challenges in that area. We all came out of Dumsor, and there are remnant problems that still exist. The key fundamental is indebtedness. Indebtedness because pricing is a challenge. How do you get Ghanaians to pay fair amount of money for electricity, at the same time looking at the socioeconomic policies that is in place, and looking at the business aspect of it, looking at a businessman establishing an IPP, making money from it, and we as Ghanaians paying our fair price. That is the key challenge facing this country. And for me, I think that is what every government should be able to put his finger on. Because I've always said that in that sector, 1 + 1 is no longer equals to 2.
Okay. Thank you very much. So your issue is you wish that we'll go back to the days when we had a Ministry of Power, and then we can have the other, so splitting the energy ministry into two.
Yes, Ministry of Power and then Ministry of Oil and Gas.
All right.
So that Ministry of Power can concentrate to deal with the pertinent problems that exist.
All right. I'll come to you, Mr. Ofosu-Ahinkra. Do you share this position about the need to split the ministry into two?
Well, if the ministry is to be split, the Ministry of Oil and Gas should concentrate on upstream only. When you come downstream, it is energy. That is where you are confronted with substitution. What you can use firewood to do, you can use gas to do that. What you can use electricity to do, you can use firewood or gas to do that. So you need a common policy for the downstream. If you split them, you have a situation like what we had in 2014, 2015, when the Ministry of Energy, which was, it was then split into two in 2015. We had the Ministry of Power, and then we had the Ministry of Energy, which was to do with oil and gas. We had big problems where each ministry was going in its own direction. At the end of the day, we ended up having gas so expensive, you cannot use it to generate electricity and sell it for any meaningful purpose. And that is what we have inherited today. So if there should be a split between Ministry of Power, or there's a split in the ministry, then the Ministry of Oil and Gas should deal with upstream. And after the oil and gas is produced, it should come to the downstream where it will be considered as part of the energy mix. That's my take on it.
All right. So that was your bonus question, actually. Now your substantive question. What are your critical issues as far as the energy sector is concerned?
Energy is supposed to accelerate development. Ever since civilization started, mankind has had to grapple with energy. Energy for cooking, energy for other things. From the Industrial Revolution, we had to rely on energy, and at that time, those countries relied on coal. And until electricity was discovered, hydroelectricity, then thermal electricity based on coal. Most of the countries in Europe and elsewhere, they developed on cheap coal-based electricity. So if we need to develop, and we need cheap electricity, cheap energy, we need reliable energy, and we need sustainable energy. We can have energy today, but for one reason or the other, it may not be sustainable. It may not be available tomorrow. During the doomsday, a lot of people shouted from the top of the roof, we need electricity, we need electricity. But when electricity was made available, the price was so high, you couldn't afford it. That doesn't make it sustainable. You could have electricity generated from coal, which is not available, but if you're forced to get it, it has environmental effects. We can have electricity generated from wood. We can cut all our forests and use it to generate electricity, but that is not sustainable. So we need adequate energy, we need affordable energy, we need reliable energy, and we need sustainable energy.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ofosu Ahenkra. I think he sets the tone very well. So we need adequate energy, we need reliable energy, we need affordable energy, and we need sustainable energy. So let me paint a certain picture before I come to the other two panelists that we have, Bright Simmons and Ben Boakye. I was just asking this question a short while ago, that where do we find ourselves? You know, we had doomsday, well, until a few years ago that it ended. But the question I'm asking myself is, how close are we to getting into another crisis like that? And in recent times, if you're monitoring the news, you hear about the IPPs, the independent power producers, complaining that they're owed monies. Now, if they decide that we're not being paid and so we're going to shut down, we're straight into doomsday. Is that correct, Mr. Ben Boakye?
Yeah, thank you. I think, it costs money to generate electricity. And when you put in money to generate electricity, the system should be able to help you recover the money that you put in. And for me, that is the biggest problem we have in the energy sector right now. Across the value chain, every agency is making a net loss year on year. In 2018, that is
when you talk about the agencies, which ones?
So you're talking about
ECG? From
generation, the state institutions of generation, transmission, and distribution. ECG alone, in 2018, Ministry of Finance data made a loss of about 3 billion Ghana cedis. So what that means is that if ECG buys power and sell the power, they are not able to recover their operation costs and also the cost of purchasing the power from the generators. And that affects everybody in the value chain, because they are the only ones in the value chain that actually sell the output of the industry. And they're supposed to pay everybody across the value chain. The net loss for the energy sector was about 2.7 billion. That's when you have put everybody together, GMPC and all of them together. So if we are not able to deal with that, you may have power plants sitting idle and they cannot generate power for you. So that is why this conversation becomes extremely important. How do we deal with the financial problems of the energy sector? And that is why it is a bit strange that in an election year, you're not really hearing from the political parties the urgency of that problem and how we deal with it as a country. It's not enough. The rhetorics about we are paying the energy sector debt, and the debt accumulation is rising. The implication of that for the ordinary person and the poor man or woman on the street is that the money that could have gone into building the schools, building the hospitals, building our roads are being used to pay generators who are sitting idle and power plants that are not generating power. So it's a very scary situation that we have to have, a fair conversation and look beyond the faces and say, let's deal with this problem and address the fundamentals of the problem. I think we tried when we realized that, the ECG was the weakest link. We needed to fix it, fix the transmission systems to reduce the inefficiencies and ensure that, we can sustain the industry. We couldn't succeed, and we don't have an alternative to really fix that. Significant investments are required to retool the distribution side. ECG in 2018, the report that was published this year in June, the net losses is about 26%. What that means is that if you give power worth $1 billion to ECG, they are not able to recover about 260 million. That is incredible. You have to reduce that to ensure that that money can be fed into the system. What that also means is that those losses that are as a result of theft, most of whom are foreigners, Chinese companies, other foreign companies tapping electricity, not paying, the debt sits on government books. You and I, who may be genuine to pay your bill, are called upon to pay more because people are stealing. Nobody cares because it doesn't come directly from their pocket. So it is a tough conversation we need to have to fix that, to ensure that we can relieve the budget of Ghana from these unwarranted payments because the energy sector is so sick and we don't confront it the way we really have to do. And year on year, it is ballooning because the ESLA that is paying is you and I. We buy petrol, 40 pesos is on it on a liter. And you don't know when the ordinary person is going to stop paying that because the debt accumulation is not ceasing. We are increasing. And the report, you will see that this year, some of the power plants are projected not to ever come on stream. AXA is not going to generate any power, but we have to pay them based on some of the decisions that we have taken, and some people still want to extend that kind of power plant. These are tough conversations. We need to rescue the country from this kind of reckless debt accumulation, which is continuously eating the budget. If you look at the energy sector debt and the financial loss, it can adequately cater for 10 ministries in their budget. The Ministry of Gender, do you know their budget? 4 million Ghana cedis. And this is an hourly loss in the energy sector. So it's a very scary situation. That is the conversation the media should be having on radio every morning. Because the road is not going to be fixed if this kind of loss is being created and generated in the energy sector. Nothing is going to get done. So there is a big problem to fix. The transmission system is also collapsing gradually. In that same report, the capacitors that are required to stabilize the system and ensure that we can reduce the losses, about 28% per the audit is functional at this point. What that means is that you have a significant chunk of that capacitors not working. And that alone in that report, we are told, if we fixed it to about 70%, we could reduce the net loss of about 35 megawatts. That is half of Liberia's energy consumption. This is waste, right? But people don't want to talk about this and ensure that we can clean up the system, bring people who can do the work. That ownership mentality, let's own ECG, let's own that. It's not helping anybody. Let's fix the problem and save the public money.
My substantive question to you is, how close are we to doing so?
It depends. Let me put it this way. It depends on how much of the budget we are willing to sacrifice year on year to sustain energy sector that is actually in the ICU. You understand? So
right.
If you are willing to always channel the budget to support the energy sector, then you can keep the light on.
Okay,
but
so
that is not sustainable.
So in effect, it's in ICU, and we're continuing to supply it with oxygen from the budget.
On the budget.
But whilst giving that oxygen to the sector, which is an ICU, we're also depriving the rest of the system, ecosystem,
absolutely,
from that oxygen.
That is the bare truth.
Okay.
Ishmael, when Bright is done, let me give you a very small synopsis of what you just asked Ben. So when Bright is done, I can take Bright.
So Bright, let me come to you now. And just tell me what you make of the energy sector, because you've done, I would want to believe, incredible research, extensive research on it.
No, well, the problem we have, I think, is very well summarized in the concept note that you shared with us ahead of the event. And that is, we have a problem which is easily characterized as market failure. We have excess energy capacity that is beyond the installed capacity of Akosombo, right? So we have an extra Akosombo that we are not using. That's similar, or it's a good illustration of the current context. The problem with these types of market failures is, we have significant state intervention that has created this market failure. Otherwise, if you come into Ghana, you produce power, and people are not buying the power, you just reduce the price, right? And you find ways to get people to consume more because the price is down. The problem where you have excess power, but somehow the price doesn't go down, is the most classic way of describing a market failure. I think that while there are a number of different operational reasons for that, the most accessible to me of all the reasons that are possible to adduce, the most accessible to me is twofold. One is accountability and transparency. So my job is really as a government watchdog. That's primarily what I do, apart from my day job, of course. And as a government watchdog, the most defining characteristic of our policy environment is policy incoherence. The policies make sense within one domain, but when you move up 20,000 feet and survey the landscape, it doesn't make sense anymore. So you have individual decision makers that are up or down a rabbit hole, making policies that when you oversee or you survey that set of policies on a much more wider canvas, you find that they are illogical. So I'll give you an example. So one of it is, or one particular source of this problem is just lack of scrutiny and oversight over decision making and its outcomes. So we have seen, for instance, efforts made to get street lights to work. As an example, I'm using a very obvious problem that everybody's aware of. And today, maybe 80% of street lights don't work. I remember one survey we did some time ago, we did not publish. It was ranging in about 85% or so in some of the major cities. So we have these street lights, people get pay levies, but they don't work. And the government invites technical people within the government to find the cause of this problem and help design solutions. They decide that the real problem is high pressure sodium not being as effective as LED, and then they move on to invest in LEDs. And a few years down the line, there's been no change. But the system is not designed for people to be accountable why the diagnosis, the initial diagnosis was wrong. Was it really an HPS to LED transition, or was it not? And we have a lot of these problems littering all around, where we say, oh, here is a problem, here is a solution, and then for some reason, the accountability to say, well, we got it wrong, or we got it right, but we did not take into account this one, doesn't seem to work. Part of that might be because the way that the system of government in Ghana is structured, and here is where I have some insight because we tend to look at multiple sectors at a time, there isn't really enough line supervision of technical agencies. So politicians only get interested when they have specific projects with specific narrow interests. But the general line supervision of technical agencies, to my mind, is weak. Another example that I'll give you very quickly is this decision to distribute a lot of solar lanterns, which I think is a brilliant decision. But when we've looked at evidence for whether or not it's working, the official government position is that, kerosene purchases are declining. The problem is, everybody here knows causation and correlation, right? The challenge, of mistaking one for the other. When you look at the same period, LPG consumption also rises. And because kerosene is also implicated in cooking, It could well be that LPG rises is what is accounting for kerosene, the lower kerosene consumption.
All right.
So my view is, without some mechanism that improves scrutiny, that is why I think people underestimate the work civil society does in this country. Because I'll tell you, 89% to 90% of the scrutiny you get from government policy and its decisions and the consequences thereof come from external parties. The technocratic checks and balances are increasingly broken. So if a technical agency thinks a particular policy is wrong, obviously they raise it, but the ability to get a particular government agency or the other to really respond is increasingly weaker and weaker. Because nowadays, there's a sense that if you're raising questions, you are asking questions about my performance, you have an ulterior motive. The last point I want to make, and this is also in relation to this market failure and this accountability and transparency dynamic, is the way the value chain has been made complex, and yet still the corresponding institutional structures have not kept pace with that same degree of sophistication. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, there was this intra-government fight about Litasco, which is a Russian company that came to Ghana more or less to do fuel trading. So they are like Trafigura. I think they replaced Trafigura in one of those consignments. I think they were producing HFO or something like that. And then before we realized, Litasco had come in to provide fuel, to sell fuel, and then they were offering financial solutions. You know, they were guaranteeing loans for busts. They were doing a whole bunch of things. And when you look and examine the policy record, it's not clear when this transition took place, why it was deemed useful to take place, who assessed its benefits, and then you have ministries writing for explanations because there's no policy record. So you have a back and forth. The same situation was realized when pricing options were looked at for Springfield and others in the energy sector. The Ministry of Finance said they couldn't understand what was happening. So there's this general lack of scrutiny that leads to sufficient accountability, and transparency is also broken. So I think if we take market failure as the primary problem, and to my mind, obviously, there are a lot of different ways you can account for that market failure and prescribe solutions to it. I think that accountability and transparency in management of the energy sector will be very critical in trying to resolve some of these issues.
All right. Thank you, Bright. I'll come to you, Mr. Kwadwo. You wanted to make an intervention regarding the question I asked earlier.
You asked to give you an estimation of when you think Dumsor can return. If nothing is done and things are left the way it is now, I'll say by 2023.
Okay, why 2023?
And let me give you why.
All right.
You know, in 2017, we deferred a lot of PPAs. There were a lot of PPAs that were signed that were said, okay, look, these are over capacity, so we don't need all these PPAs. So we deferred some of them to come on stream around 2023, 2024, some to come on 2025. All these PPAs had what you call take or pay. Now, we've heard a lot about take or pay where the government is saying, look, we no longer want to commit the government to take or pay because if we don't use the power, we have to pay the capacity charge involved. Now, before an investor will bring his plant into Ghana, he needs a guarantee, okay, an offtake agreement. This take or pay gives that investor the guarantee to be able to go to the bank to finance these projects in Ghana. Now, the Ministry of Finance now has a policy that we're no longer going to do take or pay, we're going to do take and pay. What it means is that we are no longer going to give anybody a guarantee, an offtake agreement guarantee to build a plant. So if we go, like I said, if nothing changes, all the power plants, all the PPAs that were to come on stream 2022, 2023 cannot come on stream because they cannot get the financing to build these plants because they don't have an offtake guarantee. The put-call option is not there. So it means we are stuck for now with the 4,650 that we have. This year, we've peaked demand at around 2,957 in March. Our biggest peak this year so far was 2,957 megawatts in March. That's based on the Greco stats. You compare that to 2018, that's 10%, around 8 to 10% increase to the previous year. So let's assume that we are growing at 10% in terms of year on year. By 2023, we'll be at 4,093. And our installed capacity now is 4,650. Not all these 4,650 are reliable power. Some of these generators get spoiled. Tapco, Tico, some of the old machines are Mary. Sometimes one machine works, one machine doesn't work. So you might not have all these 4,050 working, the generators working. Even the hydro, Akosombo, is to do with what is the elevation in the water. Okay, do we have enough water to run all the plants? And all this calculation is made with Valco running only one port. So if Valco still remains to run one port, then the impression we get is that by 2023, we will be at that crunch point where what we have installed, reliable power, as compared to if the demand with all the 1D, 1F going on and demand goes in the trajectory is going, will be around 4,000 demand peak in 2023.
All right.
And if we have not gotten anybody to start building a power plant by next year, by 2023, we wouldn't have any new power plants coming on stream. And 2023 will have that problem.
Okay, so that's where you see a problem happening. But we're hoping that between now and 2023, if we're having some more, or maybe technology changes, or there's new technology that will make us or put us in the position to build a power plant much earlier than would usually take, then that shouldn't be a problem.
No, it will still be a problem because you need to go to financial closure. The biggest problem we have now is that no company can go to financial closure because of the Ministry of Finance position, which is they will not give you a guarantee to build a plant. They've changed the law, which is basically going to have, and my brother from Energy Commission will help us a bit more, with the wholesale, electricity wholesale market and all that, thinking that people can just come and build a plant, supply to the wholesale market, and then you can take from there. There's only one plant in Ghana in the last 5 years that was built without a guarantee. And that plant is sitting there, it's never been used. Why? Because there was a change of government, and the new government doesn't like the name of the person who built the plant. So it tells you that there is a political risk in coming to Ghana, investing your money without a guarantee. So that's what I'm saying, that even if there's a new technology, you need a financial closure that will allow the investor to put the plant in place.
All right, so you're talking about 2023, but from where I sit, I'm looking at the situation, I'm like, if the IPPs that are agitating for their monies to be paid don't get paid, and they decide today that they're shutting down, isn't that doom so happening?
Yeah, I was just telling Kojo that 2023 is probably too far if you want to really look at the context. Load shedding or doomsaw could be a function of problems in the distribution side as well. But we tend to look at generation. As we speak, there are areas in Accra you can hardly get 180, 190 voltage in your home. It tells you that the transformers in those areas need to be replaced. They are not. The demand is outstripping the capacity of the transformers. So all these things need money. So the localized doomsaw will be increasing if we are not able to invest in the distribution sector of the value chain. So that is another concern. You may not have load shedding occasioned by generation constraint, but your light may not be on because your transformer keeps tripping. So there are systemic issues that we need to fix now to ensure that the system doesn't even collapse. And I dread that situation even more than generation shortfall. Because when power is not generated, because it doesn't exist, nobody pays. It's only the consumer that suffers. But when power is generated and you are not able to distribute, you are paying for the power that is generated and you are not getting any revenue for it because you couldn't distribute. So that is even worse for Ghana. So we need urgent investment in the distribution end to ensure that we can clean it up and ensure that the sector can pay for the cost of generating power and distributing it to homes. Other than that, the budget will be stretched to a limit which will not be too long. And then, you know, if the state is not able to pay for you, then the light goes off because they can't generate, the distributors cannot distribute because the cash flow is not sustaining the power sector.
All right, thank you very much. Now, this event is live on JoyNews on digital TV. It's also on the multi-TV Digibox. It's also streaming live on our Facebook channel, JoyNews, and also on YouTube. So the conversation again, Mr. Ahinkra, you talked about the fact that we're supposed to have adequate power, reliable power, affordable power, sustainable power. We all seem to agree that we all agree that there's overcapacity. We have a lot more power than we actually need right now. That's correct, right? Why is it that we can't just sell this power, export the power? Because that's the argument that's being made, that the plan was to have excess and sell that excess. Why is that not an option right now?
We have a semblance of a power market in West Africa. Whilst Ghana can generate and sell, other countries are also generating and selling in the same market. We buy power from Côte d'Ivoire when we have a shortage. Côte d'Ivoire sells power to us at 10 cents. It means they can sell it to Burkina Faso, to Togo, to Benin, to Liberia at 10 cents. Our power is more than 10 cents. So we simply cannot compete with Côte d'Ivoire. We have been exporting to Burkina, but we had to cut down the cost. We are selling at a loss. We are selling to Burkina at 9 cents. So we can export, yes, but at what price? Who will buy? And this actually brings us to the way we procure power. All the power plants in Ghana, IPPs, were procured through unsolicited proposals.
Please explain them.
What it means is that you sit in your office, I come, I'm an IPP, I tell you that I have electricity, I can generate for you at X cents. Will you buy? You say, oh, reduce it. Between me and you, we negotiate. And we agree, we sign a power purchase agreement. And indeed, I have with me here data on power plants in West Africa. The fixed and variable cost component of power plants in Ghana makes up 67.9% of the cost. It makes up 43.9% in Côte d'Ivoire and 30.9% in Nigeria. So,
well, please go over those figures again.
I'm saying that the fixed and variable cost component of power plants in Ghana makes up 67.9% of the cost of electricity. What it means is that if I take a power plant, you know, you break down the cost per unit into components. We have the fixed cost, we have the variable cost. The fixed cost is practically the cost of the plant, which we call capacity charges.
Let's put some figures to it. Let's take 20 cents a unit. So the unit costs 20 cents.
Yes.
Let's break down the fixed and variable.
Okay. The fixed cost, there are two components that makes up the fixed cost. The first one is the cost of the plant itself, which we call the capacity charge. It is that component of the cost which is the loan or the equity which the investor put in to build the plant for you. So that one is the capacity charge. You will pay for it whether the plant runs or does not. That's where the take or pay phenomenon comes in. Then another fixed cost is the cost of the human beings who work on the plant. If they are employed to work on the plant, whether the plant works or does not work, you have to pay them. So you add up that up to the capacity, and that gives you your fixed cost. And that one you have to pay every month. Then we have the variable. The variable cost is the cost of lubricants, the cost of water, the cost of cooling, the cost of other things. They come in only when the plant is working. And what I'm saying is that the fixed cost and the variable component of a power plant, the cost, makes up 67.9%.
That's in Ghana?
That's in Ghana. I'm not assigning any reason to it, but what is common is that the plants were not competitively procured.
Okay,
so
Ben, I'll come to you.
If you have such a structure, then you are paying more for plants than in other countries. So if you compare 67.9% to 43.9%, Côte d'Ivoire will beat you to any price competition.
Yeah, it will be more competitive, or the power that Côte d'Ivoire will sell will be more competitive than yours.
Exactly. So the high cost of power purchase agreements in Ghana is the most significant barrier. Indeed, a recent study of 36 African countries, the utilities are saying that the high cost of PPAs, 55.6% of the utilities are saying that the high cost of PPAs is what they see as a problem for their operations into the future. And the more you hike your prices in terms of PPAs, other technologies are evolving.
Yeah.
Today, somebody can give you renewable energy at 10 cents or lower. Indeed, Zambia has 6 cents PPA on solar. Senegal has 4.3 euro cents per kilowatt hour on solar. So if you hike your conventional electricity prices, somebody will undercut you with solar, and your PPA will be, it will not be patronized. Today, with battery technology, the price is going down. It used to be $200 per kilowatt hour some 3 years ago. Today, it's $146, and the target is $100. The moment it hits $100 per kilowatt hour, all thermal power plants have serious risk, because somebody can invest in renewable, they generate the electricity during the day, store it in the battery, at night sell it, and you sell it cheaper than what the conventional power plant can sell.
Yeah.
So that is the threat. That is the biggest threat to the electricity industry.
And which is why we're not able to export our power.
Yes, we cannot export unless we cut the price, unless we reduce it, deliberately reduce it.
And take the losses for it.
We have, yeah, because that's the only option left.
Yeah.
Or we induce consumption in-house. I remember 2 years ago, Energy Commission, we developed a concept paper on how to increase electricity consumption. The first way is to use electricity for vehicles. We call it the Drive Electric Initiative. It has taken 2 years. Today, ECG has launched charging points, charging stations for electric vehicles. If we had initiated it, we initiated it 2 years ago. It was launched at the 2019 Renewable Energy Fair, and if we had taken it serious, by this time, our take-or-pay obligations will have gone down.
Right.
We do not only have power capacity take-or-pay, we have gas take-or-pay.
Yeah.
If we do not use the gas to generate electricity, we still pay for it.
So 2 things I'd want us to talk about. We'll come to gas, the excess gas we have in the system and how we're going to deal with it. And then also, I'm very much interested in renewable energy and what we can do or the options available to us. But Ben, you seem to have some insights as far as the reason why we're having to pay so much for our power plants. So,
no, I think he ended up answering it. We don't, procure competitively, and that is why we are where we are. We haven't stopped. There has been some...
When you say we don't procure competitively, is it that we're just dumb and we're looking at getting better out of a deal, and yet we say, no, I just want to buy, power more expensively?
I think I can borrow from Bright and stay safe. It's not as if you can't go competitive, even if when you're in emergency. There are emergency plans that you can actually, through restrictive tender, ask for quotes and pick one. We don't do that. All right.
Why are we beating about the bush? It has to do with corruption.
It's politics. I can summarize it as politics.
Politics.
Yeah, that's really it. And I think we've been hearing that we want to streamline it and deviate from that practice, but we never do. And it's because the Energy Commission that does the planning will not be the one, determining who comes in.
How does politics get us to buy power?
Because ministers are the procurement officers.
Who said corruption? Okay, Dr. Steve Mantel. Let me bring Dr. Steve. Can you please come over? Please come over.
But whilst he's doing that,
yes,
let me put in a quick word.
Yeah, you do that.
Okay.
Put in your quick word. Then I come to you, Dr.
Now,
Steve Mantel.
You see, you have the luxury to talk of how power was procured because people are not in darkness and the noise is not on. You see, proper planning will allow us to do it ahead of time. Yeah. If it catches up with us and everybody is crying that there's no light, you don't have that wiggle room. That's why I said earlier that the financial closure is very important. The company that has the money to readily do that work for you is going to take an arm and leg. So I don't think it's really to do with corruption. We didn't negotiate well in 2012 because I think that the politicians did not allow the technocrats to do the work. But I would not say it's corruption. It's more to do with trying to get something done immediately to fix an immediate problem. And as a result, the person who has the money take advantage of you.
Dr. Steve Mantel, please elaborate on why you say it's corruption.
Well, I listened to, was it Bryce Simmons or who was talking about unsolicited proposals for construction of thermal power plants. Another name for unsolicited proposal is sole sourcing. That is, the plants are not procured competitively. The result will be padded cost, which then affects the cost of power. It's corruption.
Okay, he summed it up nicely. Now that I'm on the floor, if anybody wants to make an input, this is the time. So all right. So can we bring a microphone over here, please? Yes. And then we can take your take on it. Well, please introduce yourself. I know you. But
Kwame Janto is my name.
Yes.
It's got to do with planning. When you look at some other countries, they have a 20-year plan for energy. And we know the basis of energy, what energy does for a country. So if you depend on energy with party manifestos, a new party comes in, they would not take what the old party had done, and they'll bring their own. So without critical planning of the energy sector, you always have these drop boxes all the time. Because I'll come in, oh, I don't want X, I don't want Y, so I'll do it my own way. Apart from that, we haven't segregated the different generation modules. So for instance, we are talking about renewables. And we say in Ghana today, quite a lot of the energy is consumed by residential. So if we're talking renewables, why don't we say from this time on till probably the next 5 to 10 years, every household should have a solar panel on their roof. Every household. So that within a certain duration of time, the renewable energy that we want, most of residential would have it. And then you now take power from the normal generation types off and probably hit it into industry. But if there's no plan for industry, if there's no plan to use energy how residential people should use it, then where are you going? You're just chasing your tail. And as one of the American commentators said, it is not the tail wagging the dog, it's the dog wagging the tail. No, it's the other way around. If it is not the tail wagging the dog, it's the dog wagging the tail. So instead of the dog going and wagging the tail rather is wagging the dog as to where it should go. I believe that the sector is very technical, extremely technical. And you need technical people and not politicians. When I say this, they come at me. But it's true. In some countries, if you haven't been in the energy sector and haven't practiced in it, and you haven't shown yourself to understand it, you don't get to be an energy minister. You don't get to head some of the institutions. And we've got to a stage where we need to take the politics out. Because if we don't take the politics out, it becomes very, very difficult, even in putting money into the sector. The politicians know that energy gets votes. And so they would paper over. Yes, we have X energy here. Oh, it's working. Then another government comes in, shoom, into doom so. Was it true or was it false? We need honesty, especially where energy is concerned, because Dumso showed us what lack of energy can do to this country. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kwame Gentile. Mr. Inkra, the issue about planning, I would want to think that that's where the Energy Commission comes in. So the Energy Commission should be able to forecast and tell us that we'll be needing so much electricity. And based on that, we procure accordingly and ahead of time so that we don't get into a situation where there's a crisis and that's where we have to buy power. And that, as you say, makes it more expensive. Is it that the Energy Commission is not planning, or is the case that the plans are there, but we're not implementing the plans?
The plans are there. Indeed, the first plan, which we call the Strategic National Energy Plan 1, ends this year. Plan 2 ends in 2030. And that plan is available. Forecast, projections, everything has been done. And if planning is the problem, then we don't have a problem. The problem is how to implement that plan. And as I said, if there are unsolicited power plants coming in, you will end up having a price of electricity way beyond what you anticipated. Again, I will use my comparative figures. Residential sector in Ghana pays 12.6 cents. In Cote d'Ivoire, they pay 11.2. In Nigeria, they pay 5.0.
But when you talk about Nigeria, do they actually get the power?
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
Because Nigeria has cheap power because they have cheap gas. They have cheap gas. They buy gas at $4 per million BTU. Ghana, we buy the composite or weighted average price is $6.08. Some plants are about $9 per million BTU. So if you have the cheap sources not producing enough, you end up having high price. Cote d'Ivoire has gas price of $6. It means that the cost per fuel in a unit of electricity is just about 6 cents for simple cycle plant and about 3.5 cents for a combined cycle plant. If you add the capacity charges, Cote d'Ivoire will beat you to anything within 9-10 cents. So price is our biggest enemy. Yeah. If we are not able to deal with the price, we are in trouble. And as I said, the solar, the renewable energy, the price is on a downward trend.
Yeah.
And very soon, individual houses and other things, they will go solar. They will go solar because everybody wants reliable electricity at an affordable price.
Okay, let's stick with the gas sector. What are the issues in the gas sector? I come to you, Bright. Would you want to take up the issues in the gas sector? Because it appears we have excess gas available and it's not cheap.
Yeah, I mean, the problems that confronting the gas sector are not that significantly different from what we have in the electricity sector, if you're being candid about it. We definitely have to figure out the export strategy. And that export strategy is not purely a matter of policy and leave it at policy. It requires trade diplomacy. So we have a government, and this is not very different from other governments in the sub-region, that generally doesn't invest in regional trade diplomacy. The reason why, if you take the American embassy as an example, and you remove intelligence and security operations, trade diplomacy tends to be the most dominant form of diplomacy they do, is because they understand that one of the principal reasons why you will invest money in a diplomatic outpost is to grow your export market. So we have embassies in places like Nigeria and the like, and when you think through it and you actually study the outcomes of these types of investments, you find out that we're not doing enough trade diplomacy. If the power transmission corridor fully comes on stream, and it can only come on stream when the individual governments are doing well in implementing their part of the bargain, they are making the investments and the rest of it. We now have something that is close to a regulator, the West Africa Power Pool, in the region. The problem is that individual countries are not sufficiently empowering the ECOWAS Commission to do this work. Now, if that cannot be fixed, because that goes well beyond our policymaking capacity, what about our own efforts in building the wholesale market for our own producers? So we seem to forget that increasingly, that wholesale market dynamics that Mr. Poku is very skeptical about will still have to be the element that brings in resilience. Because this reliance on government procured power has a limit. So I need to be able to, like Enclave Power is doing, have industrial estates in Ivory Coast and industrial estates in Burkina Faso buy directly from wholesale power producers. It's not going to work if we're going to rely on only government procured power. So if I have an industrial estate in Burkina Faso and I want to buy power, I have two dynamics, right? I'm looking at price and I'm looking at quality. Quality in energy is primarily reliability. Ghana may not be competing on price well enough now, but we could compete on reliability if we are focused on doing what is important. So part of that is investing in the interconnectors so that the interconnectors are strong. We are currently doing the reinforcement of the one with Ivory Coast, and we are making a few investments also on the one on the eastern border. But the truth is that beyond that, you also need to do the the trade diplomacy. Send people to Burkina Faso to talk to producers, start sending them to Ivory Coast, working on building demand for your products. It may not be effective immediately, but talking about planning, in a few years to come, being able to harness private wholesale markets will be extremely critical to our resilience. The other issue is looking at other value chain opportunities for the gas. We've been talking about liquefaction for a while now. The Tema LNG project, a few other LNG projects that we've been discussing. The truth is we've not made much progress when it comes to liquefaction. We need to be able to liquefy the gas and export the gas. I don't see any way out than investing in liquefaction so that we have increased flexibility. The last area that I also think we've been missing when it comes to strategic thinking is the LPG value chain in the region. So some of the countries are behind us in terms of the consumption cycle. You know, Ghana is on a really upward swing when it comes to LPG consumption, and we've been that for a while now. I think it's now plateauing. If you go to countries like Mali, Niger, and the rest, they are now beginning to see the upswing, and it will increase. We've been producing enough, not enough, but we produce a significant amount of LPG now with local gas. Some of the gas could also go into producing LPG for regional export, and I don't think we're spending enough time looking at that. I want to make a few comments on some of the points that have been made previously, very quickly.
All right, please do.
A few seconds. So one is that I agree with Ben and disagree slightly with Kwejo when he talks about the generation issue being priority. Because I was just looking at my notes when he was saying that by 2024, we will not have financial closure, and therefore we could potentially see a crisis in 2023.
2023.
And I was looking at some of the projects that are already on stream. So Metka has 2 projects that I checked. Siemens Rotterdam has another project. Bridge Power has some additional projects that are also on stream. So we could potentially have 2,000 megawatts come on stream, even now that the guarantee issues are still a problem. So it's not generation per se, as Ben was putting it. I think the more fundamental problem that we have right now is the market failure problem. Until we have a situation where increasingly the power producers are willing to be innovative about the export market, I don't think they'll be able to fix the problem looking only at the local value chain. That's one problem. But I do agree with Kwejo that the government still has to continue to provide subsidies of some form or the other, because we have a transitional problem we need to fix. The other thing that I also think is quite critical is we have to start looking at the policy coherence thing again, even in this area. So let me give you a very quick example. All of us are praising the movement of the car power barge from Tema to Takoradi, and it's a huge policy win for the government. Yes, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but I think we then forgot that GNGC, which was supposed to be the gas transmission, both regulator and operator, will be losing tariffs, right? Because the idea was to transport the gas and charge for the transportation. So you take from one and you give to the other. I'm not saying that we should continue to give money to GNGC for nothing if we can somehow cut costs to consume, but I'm just saying then you have to start looking at the gas transmission master plan again. Because all of a sudden we have this gas transportation infrastructure that is increasingly useless. We have one that interconnects us to other regions through the West Africa system. That has not been very productive because of the way that we set it up. I think too much intergovernmental reliance, rather than relying on businesses across the region more and more to kind of shape some of these things. Last point is some more innovative solutions around how do you address the political and the financial risk. Because a lot of the pricing problems, that is why there's a disagreement between Kwejo and Dr. Hinkre here about whether it's corruption. It's not corruption. There is financial and political risk which goes into the pricing, and we have to admit it. Is insurance going to be an important element going forward? Because I think the reliance only on export insurance from Western and Eastern countries is increasingly not sufficient. So could there be regional insurance opportunities to reduce some of that risk, which they might bring some of the pricing down? So we have to start thinking really creatively and innovatively about some of these things. But corruption is definitely a problem. We just can't blame it all on corruption because financial and political risk is also important. Thank you.
All right. So, Kwejo Foku wants to react to that. But I would also be coming to you, Ben Boakye, about the gas issue. So, Kwejo,
Yeah, I'll quickly. I think I did not say that government should provide subsidies, please. I did not say that. Government. Well, well, that is the unspoken word, but I mean, I did not say that government should give subsidies. I just to clarify that. Quickly, I just want to make a point. The issue of gas, and I just want to clarify that now going into gas. We have our own gas, okay? Our own gas that we get can be ramped up more than what they're currently doing. So the 10 fields is doing about 210 mmcf per day. The Sankofa 10 is doing 125, Sankofa is doing 210, which can be ramped up going forward if we need more gas. The problem is that you now have government talking about thermal LNG. You ask yourself, what is thermal LNG for? Because we have our own gas that we need, if we need it, we can ramp it up. Thermal LNG is not like what my brother Bright is saying that we might need to liquefy our own gas and store it. Thermal LNG is to import liquefied natural gas. Why are we going to import liquefied natural gas when we have more of our own which we can use? Now, the gas that we get from Nigeria is cheaper than our own gas that we get from our own fields.
Is that really the case?
Yes. Okay? So the issue is that we don't need extra gas imported. And the whole LNG conversation came from a report. What was the report? We have found some gas fields. We have signed all these PPAs. So to be able to run all these PPAs, we needed a certain amount of gas. We didn't have that much gas. So it was like, okay, if all these PPAs that have been signed are to come on stream, then we will need extra gas to come in so we can do that through LNG. When the politicians sat down and cancelled and abrogated and postponed the PPAs, they didn't now go back and say, okay, then there's no need for these LNG because then we don't have these all 10,000, 8,000 power plants coming on.
Yeah.
Okay? But they still stuck with, and in the last 4 years, we've heard about all these companies that have signed agreements with GMPC. The president will travel and come back and produce, oh, there is a great news. We've got this company coming in to do this. And everybody seems to be pushing ahead with this LNG program. And my question is, for what? We have our own gas, which we are not producing, but we want to bring in excess gas through LNG. What we should be looking at, and like I said, Bright said, how do we liquefy our own gas and store it? Because you're looking at any time as we speak, if there's a blowout in the gas plant, and there's no gas coming from the Western Enclave to the Eastern Enclave, we only have to rely on gas coming in from Nigeria. So then, if we don't have gas coming in from Western Enclave, all the Western plants will only rely on the Nigerian gas, West African gas pipeline, and then it wouldn't be enough. If there's no gas coming in from the Western Enclave to the Eastern Enclave, same problem occurs. How do we now liquefy our own gas and have storages so that in 2, 3 days, 4 days that it takes to fix these problems, we can now have access to some gas to use for these plants? And those are investments the power plants can do themselves. Government doesn't even have to do it, but you just have to be led by government in a policy direction. Thank you.
I have your take on the gas issue, Ben.
Yes, I think that the policy incoherence is incredible. You know, we're talking about gas. We have our own gas, which is take or pay. Whether you consume it or you don't consume it, you will pay. You have to prioritize those gas. If you don't, you pay penalties. These are in agreement. So your first struggle is really to utilize that gas to ensure that you're not paying for gas that you're not consuming. And yet, the focus really is bringing in additional gas because policy-wise, we are able to drop in some plans that allow that kind of importation to be justified. So even in government's own policy that was developed recently, the ESRP, there is a projection that says that LNG will be required post-2026, 2027. And yet, we are expecting to bring in LNG end of this year. So that is an additional cost of between $250 to $300 million a year, which will have to be paid for some way, somehow. So those are the things that we have to iron out to ensure that we don't continue to incur unnecessary costs. And also, when you do that kind of mistakes or poor planning, you disincentivize your own market, the upstream operators, because Tullow wants to produce more gas. E&I wants to produce more gas. All the contracts that you have given out, there is the possibility of discovering gas or oil. So what the contractor has to worry about now is, what if I discover gas? Where is the market for my gas? So there is no incentive to even drill. So because of these decisions, it's having impact across the entire energy value chain. And we need to tighten our planning and ensure that we don't drop in plans that justify poor investment decisions. And it also affects the institutions. Energy Commission will be doing planning, and the politician will tell you, oh, we want to ensure that VACO is optimized. It's going to be optimized in 2 years. When clearly, they know that they're not going to put in money to allow the port lines to come on stream. So they will tell you, oh, we're estimating that we'll consume 5,000 megawatts in 3 years. If VACO doesn't come, there is no consumption for the power. Meanwhile, you would have planned to bring in the generators, and they will be sitting idle. Somebody has to pay for it.
Yeah.
No. So these are the problems with our planning and how politics interface with some of the critical decisions that we have to.
As I indicated earlier, I'll come to you. As I indicated earlier, we're live on TV. We have 10 minutes to go off. I'd want us to spend the few more minutes that we have to talk about renewable energy, and then state what you think we should do, the radical but practical solutions to the challenges in the sector. But Bright, you have your take, and then
I was just going to quickly add that one of the reasons why liquefaction is so important is it might be safer to have regional nodes for liquefied gas than to actually do distribution of gas in its natural state, which is the plan. So, but at the very least, the domestic consumption of gas and the infrastructure that will enable the distribution of gas to industrial plants and the likes of it, it will be important to have an update from the government whether that is still priority, because we've seen very little investment go in that area. And it's not investment from the government directly, but investment from the private sector that has to be incentivized. We need gas in Buankra, and we need gas in all of these other locations, but there's no node planning that suggests that we're going to get prioritization when it comes to domestic gas infrastructure anytime soon. So I thought I should just make that point as well.
Yeah, and whilst you have the microphone, let's just conclude on this. What should we be doing with the renewable energy sector? And what would you say should be the radical but practical solution we should be looking at regarding the challenges we have in the sector?
So some of that opportunity, I think the market is better at weighing it. When it comes to microgrids, if a particular chain homes or one of these big estates that are popping up, if they think they can build microgrids and sell within that region, we have to look at the policy again, whether it's sufficiently flexible to allow microgrids and micro pricing at that level. So I can set up my own little plant for my own little estate and sell the power within that enclave. When it comes to bigger national scale projects, the difficulty that I have is that the technology curve, while it's very rapidly rising, it's also somewhat moderated by technical capacity. So when you look at a lot of the solar estates, as an example, if you're not using, for instance, concentrators or whatever, you're using photovoltaic, maintenance are tended to be a problem for big installations. So I think Dr. Hengra was talking about the Zambian experience and the rest of time. There are two problems that we have in Ghana, obviously. One is what I've just mentioned, the technical capacity to ensure that maintenance is sound. And those of you that have been studied the maintenance regime in this country, even the old technologies we struggle with. Go and see our maintenance schedules and how often we are off maintenance schedule in this country in thermal, which is a very old technology. So when it comes to newer technologies, we need to think about maintenance and the skill sets that must be available locally to think through that. The second one is also that we do have some geographical disadvantages in some part of the country. That means that, it's not the heat, right? It's the sun and its incidence. And some of the studies that have been, I'm not very current, but I know a few years ago, some of the studies that this suggest that there are geographical locations in this country where incidence, for instance, was lower than Germany. So though it appears as if Ghana has a lot of solar potential, there are geographies where that is not very effective. So we have to take a much more elaborate perspective.
Is that for Anchor?
All right, thank you. I will start from the gas. At the moment, we have excess gas, significant amount of excess gas. And we are stuck with it. The best thing we can do is to consume it. How do we consume that? At the moment, gas is restricted to power plants. Our industries continue to use liquid fuel, either HFO or LCO, the liquid fuels. If we are able to connect our industries to gas, they will consume a lot of the gas, and they will be able to make value addition to the gas. The second alternative, and when I talk of industry, I mean industry and mineral processing.
All right.
The second thing is the transport sector. Countries in the West, United States and other things, Russia, they started using natural gas for transportation way back 30 years ago, where taxis are running on compressed natural gas. We can do that in Ghana. And to retrofit trucks to run on natural gas is no space science. Can be done, and can be done effectively and easily. We have to look at that quickly. Gas as a feedstock. Unfortunately, we have very expensive gas, and no industry can survive on the sort of gas we have as a feedstock. Indeed, gas at a price of more than $3.50 per MMBTU is not appropriate for fertilizer or those urea plants that we are talking about. So immediately, what we have to do is to accelerate the use of gas inside the country. And coming back to your question of renewable energy, the renewable energy resources we have in Ghana are the rivers, some of which are drying up. The solar, we have two types of solar, or easily that come in mind, the photovoltaic and the thermal solar. That is, we use solar energy to heat water and to drive electricity generation turbines. Unfortunately, we can do that only in the north, somewhere around the Upper East region, where cloud cover is much lower.
All right.
In the south, we cannot do that. So the limitation to photovoltaic is that at the moment, those that are connected to our grid system are far expensive, 20 cents, 18 cents. And we cannot afford to have more of that. With our gas overhang, if you add 1 unit of PV electricity or renewable electricity to the grid, you strand 1 kilowatt of capacity. That is going to cost you 5.5 to 6 cents. Then you also throw away about 8 cents value of
power. So in the context, what I want to say is that it's just an implementation, but the LNG factor
is not a bad
is
thing.
not that bad.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Maybe one
now,
second
reaction.
1 second reaction to that. And
Okay, 1 second reaction.
I think this is where policy conversation becomes so crucial, and not in the comfort of government taking all the decisions about whether we need more gas or we don't need more gas. We have to dissect the issues much more critically. You see, we have power plants that are mostly dual fuel plants. So you have already built security into your systems. So if you are lucky to have consistent supply of gas from your domestic sources, then the investment you would have made in the liquid fuel segment becomes your security. So you can have a full tank of LCO, just idling in case you have that emergency to be able to use it. Now, the decision we are making is to forego that investment and now go and make additional risky investment into an LNG that could cost us $250 million and in excess. For what reason? And what happens to that investment that we have made in liquid fuel supplies and all of that? So I think this is where we have to critically examine it and not waste other investment, because even if you have to pay a margin for liquid fuel supply and switching when there is emergency, the loss is very insignificant compared to bringing additional supply of gas that you have to pay for, because it's also take or pay. So LNG is not needed if we're really critical about how we optimize the energy sector to ensure that we don't compound the cost on the consumer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to say one or two things and then say the vote of thanks. As I was sitting there, I was wondering, if Abeku was here today, what would he have said about the discussions we've had today? And I said to myself, Abeku would have said, we've had a very good discussion, a very professional discussion, as usual, going through all the issues we've been talking about for the past 20 years, examining options we've had for the past 20 years, except for a few that may have come on the table recently. And he would have concluded that most of our issues are self-made, and our options are only available to people who have positioned themselves to take advantage of them. Now, why do I say that? When you get yourself into a position where you're so indebted, some of the options we discussed here, they're not available to us anymore. And we continue to dig that hole and go into it. You can look at it from your pit and look at the sky, but for a man who is in the pit, it's not your option. If the option is for people who are walking on flat ground, don't count it amongst the options you have. I think that's what Abeku would have said. And I think the second thing he would have said is, can we run this sector as a business? And if we run it as a business, it will mean examining all the options we talked about today and conclude for ourselves which ones work for us and which ones don't. Our pricing will be competitive. We will not have to fear people going off the grid. If the grid electricity is competitive, why are you afraid of people not taking it? So you're only afraid because there's something wrong with what we're providing for the people. So it's important that as a sector, it be run as a business. How many businesses can survive the kind of thing we do for our energy sector? Where year in, year out, we have the same discussions, we create new issues, we get indebted, but as well, because we get free money from the citizens, we can afford to continue to run it this way. If you're running a business where you have to go to a bank to loan money, nobody will give you money after a while. So I think we've had some discussion, but we're going to have to continue to have a really real one. Real discussion, because some of it is missing. And I hope that our next few discussions will get to examining the options as part of the feasibility of our sector. If you are going to borrow money, you'll be asked to do a pre-feasibility, feasibility, business plan, so forth. If this is going to be a business and we're going to go somewhere, it's going to have to do the same. So at the Abeku Bruhammon Memorial Foundation, this is just one of the few platforms we are going to be mounting to have the discussion. Abeku was passionate about energy. We will pursue this. We will create the platforms for people to make their contributions by way of ideas and so forth. We will communicate the ideas that come to the relevant agencies. We will engage. We want to ensure action. I think it's about time. Enough talk. Our sector is going down, and with it, our country will go down. Let's not mince any words about this. If we allow the sector to go down, our economy will go down, our country will go down with it. But we cannot afford it. So we have to do the right thing. So those are my comments for today. And I think lastly, Abeku would have said, but we can do better. We can do better, we can act faster, we can take the issues urgently and do something about it. So those are my words with you, and with that, I want to say the vote of thanks. On behalf of the family of Abeku Hammond, the board of the foundation, Abeku Hammond Memorial Foundation, I want to say a big thank you to everybody, those who are here with us and the virtual audience. I also want to say a big thank you to our experts. We gave them such short notice. They've come, they've really discussed the issues. So well. I also want to say thank you to Joy. I can't breathe. This mask is difficult. I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. Israel and Joy, thank you so much. I want to say a big thank you to, thank you. We need the media houses to send the message out there. Thank you so much. Thank you, BNFT, for coming on board as well. Thank you so much. This is a finance issue, the financial sustainability of our energy sector. You once again proven that you're really interested in anything financed in our country. Thank you very much. And last but not the least, actually, VNRE came to our aid and helped us do this. And they show one more time that they are big boys in the sector. They're able to have sponsor even discussions like this, even though they may be one of the players who are being talked about. VNRE, thank you so much for your sponsorship. Ladies and gentlemen who came here to support this, I want to say a big, big, big thank you to all. So now, before we go off, we'll say a closing prayer.